We're good.
Okay, awesome.
All right. So let me start by saying welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend if it's your lunch hour with us, whatever it may be, the time with us today. We're really excited to share this information. This is work we've done and we learned from, and we're hoping to share all of that uh, you know, experience with you. So we want to help you move if you can uh, from beyond delivery or just delivery to measurable business results. And one of the things to do that is understanding benefits realization. And we're here to share that with you. And that's what this workshop was designed for you. So whether you're helping a PMO, whether you're helping finance or business leaders, or whether it's just for yourself, your own personal growth and development, all of the things that we're going to share in today's workshop are things that you can take with you to all of those areas in your life. So thank you again for joining us. Again, I've been a strategic portfolio leader doing this type of work for the last, I don't know how many years. So I'm excited to be able to share my experiences, my pitfalls, and all the tips along the way to help you implement this in your whatever area you choose to implement this in, or maybe all of them. Who knows? I'll let Denise introduce herself too.
Yeah, well, Angelica has worked for me for many years, and we worked with each other in the corporate setting, and now we work with each other in my new business setting. So I am just thrilled that she's on my team, and she keeps me on my toes and keeps the team on their toes with all of these things. But she is the expert when it comes to this. I'm going to be here today to talk about any corporate things that I've witnessed or executive components and how to talk with executives and all that sort of thing. I'm here to talk about that part as well, but also just to show bright side success and some of the tips that we have for you. We like to make sure that when you leave this workshop, you are aware of some tips and tricks, just little things that we've learned to help you make each day better and showing how something is valuable to a company, valuable about yourself and your career when you're interviewing or when you're working day to day is really key to everything. Businesses don't hire people to just do some work. They hire them to solve a problem or provide value. And so we're here to share that today. So we can get going, Angelica.
Yay. Okay. You're on slide 3. So organizations often lose 30 to 70% of projected benefits due to something called optimism bias and weak ownership. So if many of you have experienced this, I know we have throughout the years in corporate, but business relationship management as a practice is meant to bridge the gap between ensuring the investments deliver real outcomes, not just outputs. So we'll talk about those in a little bit, and I'll give you even some fun activities to test yourself on, do you understand an output versus an outcome? But it also strengthens things in your in governance and accountability. And that's a big one, right? Are we making people, even in our own life, accountable? And then it also affects, and when we share some of the examples, our real life examples, it also shapes decision quality, because the more you implement this practice, the more your decisions are based on quality data, and the better the decision will be that you make, right? So you want to show you're delivering something of value. We all do. We all want to understand our own value too. So lots of people will say they want to build something, but why? Why? And are you really delivering on what you said you were going to deliver? So and especially when margins and resources are short, um, you probably feel this in your own life too, right? When your resources, whether it's money or people or whatever, are short, same thing in companies, you want to make sure your team is focusing on what is really delivering value. Okay.
Yeah, and I would
The
say
next,
sometimes, Angelica, from a corporate side of things, we see this when we have this feeling like something is really painful or something just isn't working out right. When you have that feeling, try to put the data behind that feeling. Okay, yeah, I'm feeling this because I'm working 80 hours a week. Okay, that's a metric. I'm working too much, my team is working too much, or we don't have the things that we need to get something done. That whenever you have that feeling something isn't right, put the metrics and the math behind it is really what we're talking about.
Nope. Create your baselines.
Mm-hmm.
Start to measure. What do they say? If you can't measure it, you can't change it. So
Right,
start to
right.
measure. Yeah. Okay. So next slide. All right. So what today we talked about it. What you're going to learn in this workshop. So we're going to talk about evidence-based business cases. So again, we'll talk about that data that Denise just mentioned. We'll talk about applying forecasting as a discipline. We'll talk about variance reporting and how that helps. So you see data, 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 so data-driven decisions here, right? We'll talk about reprojecting business cases dynamically and what that means. And then we'll talk about the lessons learned to strategic insights. So we'll cover all of those topics in today's workshop. It's condensed, high impact workshop. So I'm hoping you'll get, and it will be a full hour. So hopefully you'll get lots of practical tips throughout the session today. Hopefully we start some right conversations around value. And again, whether it's your PMO, yourself, that you apply this to during interviews or when you want to ask for a raise or even your personal relationships, having clarity around value is critical. So hopefully you'll take lots of great stuff away from today's session. Slide 5.
Yeah, I think I'm ahead of you here, Angelica, but I am on. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's okay.
you're there
Go for
already.
it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So let's first talk about these definitions. So I did mention a little bit earlier, output, outcomes versus benefits. Let's understand what the difference is first, and then I'll give you a little fun activity where you could try to tell me which one's which, okay? So outputs. Outputs are things that are delivered, okay? So outcomes are changes in behavior or capability. That's how I like to think of it. And benefits are the value realized, whether that's financial, operational, time saved, customer impacting, or risk related. Okay. And right here, you'll see we like to incorporate our bright side tips when we do this, because there's lots of great ways to integrate this into your business value. Denise, I'll hand it over to you. What is this 3, 4, 5 thing that you're talking about, or impact framework?
Okay,
I know
well,
what it is, but I'll let you share.
yeah, I know you know what it is. Okay, so I had to do a lot of executive presentations in my day, and sometimes they were just back to back. And at times, when I found myself in a presentation and I was saying something like, "Oh, we're doing great," or "The numbers are looking good," and then I would have no data behind it, I always felt a little stuck. And so my awesome coach taught me to look at 345 on my keyboard. And you can look at the keyboard right there, 345, that it's, a number, a dollar, and a percent right above those numbers. And the reason my coach said look at the number is most of the time when I'm presenting like this, I have my computer right in front of me. And so if I get stuck, I look at 345 and I go, okay, don't just say it's getting hard. Okay, our workload has doubled. We are now working 80-hour work weeks. Our spend is 10% more than it was last year. Okay, 10% means something to people. Instead of our budget of $2 billion, now we have 10% on top of that we're forecasting for next year. And so those numbers, dollars, and percentages add a little bit of context to what you're talking about. So when you find yourself kind of over, just over like glazing over something, that's where I layer in the dollar sign, the percent sign, and any number to quantify my work. And so that's our tip for today. And it's something that I even used today. I was in a meeting and I was like, great, we have a whole new team. Okay, well, we have 2 more people on our team and we're happy to have them joining us. You could just add a little bit more context and it adds such a rich conversation. So Angelica, anything you want to add on that before you move on with your cool quiz?
No, you recapped it nicely. It's, a lot of times you hear people say, well, I wanted to learn more about the numbers because I want to be able to speak to executives better or speak executive speak. This is exactly it. If you talk money, scale, and improvement with numbers backing it, you've got people's attention, and you definitely have executive attention based on what Denise is saying.
Awesome. Okay. I don't know if I go to the next slide, I'm going to give it away. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you guys ready? We're gonna
Yeah,
give you
this
a
is
couple, yeah, a couple of opportunities to figure out which one's an output, which one's an outcome, or which one's a benefit, right? And you've probably seen all these kinds of statements on things that say, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. So I want to see if you can figure out what's really an output of an initiative, and what is really an outcome, and what is a benefit. So let's try number one. What do you guys think? A new CRM system has been successfully deployed across all the sales organization. What do you think?
The
Is it
output.
Output.
Yep. Output. It was a delivered artifact or capability. It's not a change or a value yet, or being expressed as a change or a value yet, or change value. Number two, sales representatives now log 95% of customer interactions in one centralized system. Who wants to take that one?
Outcome.
It's an outcome. Yeah. It describes a measurable behavioral change resulting from the output, but what's the real value? Let's see. Number three. You guys can throw it in the chat. You can chime in. Let me know. Win
Number
rates,
three looks
a
like
benefit?
something that was achieved, right? Win rates increased by 12%.
Yes, tangible
Benefits.
business value and financial impact. So it is definitely a benefit statement. So yes, great. How about number four? Anybody want to grab that one or put it in the chat?
these are tricky. These are tricky.
Outcomes.
Yeah.
It looks like an outcome, but it could also be a benefit.
It's an outcome. You guys, your first instinct was right. It shows measurable performance improvement, but then the value is not expressed yet. It's like, answer the question, so what? I always loved that question. Denise used to push me on it all the time. She'd send back like statuses and be like, and so what? Or she'd send back something and be like, can you give me the so what? So many times we get caught in that trap where we express the outcome in measurable way, but we don't actually express why or how or what did it actually do? What does that mean? The so what? I love to call it the so what.
It sounded bad the way you just described me, but I meant it in the most loving way.
Of course you did. You pushed me. You pushed me for the right reasons. You wanted the value, and that's the right kind of push. You're absolutely right. And number five, the initiative saved $750K annually in vendor costs. What do you think?
Benefit.
Benefit.
Yep. Benefit.
Benefit. Anytime you have like clear cost savings, clear efficiency savings, those are definitely benefit statements. So, and I'm going to share an example with you about a really huge project that I worked at in a corporation. It was an implementation of a billing system. The project was huge. Money was being spent all over the place for this. And I was actually on the project for months before I even understood what the value of the project was, what the real value of the project was. So no surprise, it was a telecom company. I won't say names or anything like that, but millions and millions of dollars, right? And everybody was saying, oh, and we implemented this and we've completed training here. And everybody was talking outcomes. And it was this one meeting that I was in, and somebody actually, I said, okay. And then somebody said, you know what the value is, Angelica? And I'm like, no, I don't understand. There's like these millions and millions of dollars but it sounds like you guys had a system that kind of did all the same stuff. Like, I don't understand. Well, apparently the new system allowed them to sell a specific brand. I won't name brands because I don't know if I'm supposed to, but it's a brand we all use. Spoiler alert. And if we didn't do this, we'd never be able to sell that brand, that very popular brand. And when they said that to me, it was like, oh, okay, now I understand what the benefit of all this is, because we needed certain functionality to be able to sell a very, very popular brand of phone in our retail stores. And that to me was, okay, now I understand why I'm doing all of this. now I understand why everybody's working endless hours. I don't know, Denise, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah.
but-
Well, yeah, there's a couple things I heard in what you said, and it's so powerful is how many times are we working on something and we don't truly know the value of it? And wouldn't we work better if we knew the value of it? So it's okay to ask. It's okay to ask. I mean, Angelica had to ask more than 5 questions to get to those 5 whys to get to that answer. And it's an important one. And it was a serious pivot to our company to do this project. But if you don't understand why are you working on something? I think about that with all the AI work coming our way. Everything is really cool with AI. I am using Claude every day. I am playing with all the tools. But then when I go, well, how much did I save money? No, I actually spent more money. Did I save time? Maybe I saved 5 minutes. Then I'm trying to get that value connected to it. So, we talk about this in the projects we're working on, but how are you spending your time too? Is it valuable? Is it useful? So, there's a bunch, find out what you're working on and make sure you're adding value.
All right, the next one I want to talk about in our next one is common failures when it comes to benefits realization, right? So often fails due to very optimistic, we'll say optimism bias in project assumptions, project benefits, leading to unrealistic expectations. So I always use the overinflated business case. I don't know how many of you have ever experienced this. I know I experienced it very intimately. And some of the things that we'll share that we did or implemented through our tips and tricks and shares in this workshop will help you understand the types of things you can do to start really creating change. And optimism bias is one of them. We're going to make $600 million in the next 5 years. Okay. What does your business case say? And sometimes they will have good outcomes listed with good percentages, but what are you really building into those numbers? And really digging into that data is very important to make sure you're not having this particular problem or fail within the implementation of a benefits realization system. Weak accountability for benefits. So this is another one. Benefits are sometimes tied to unsupported metrics, so causing unclear accountability for those responsible for achieving the results. So this happens a lot with operational metrics, like we're going to sell 600,000 more of this. Okay, it's an optimism bias, but it is supported with some sort of metrics, right? You're putting a percentage on it of how much more you're going to sell. So that's great. A lot of times they don't have these things identified. And when I say these things, these metrics identified in the beginning, and that ends up linking you or getting to an end of the project and not knowing how you're going to support those metrics. So it's really important to define those metrics and define them as really going to measure what we're trying to get to. So sometimes just having a metric is not enough. It has to be a metric that's actually gonna, or maybe multiple metrics that'll really measure what you want to measure, or that's going to measure your benefit, and then also creating weak accountability. So you have to know who's accountable for those benefits. And a lot of times in the course of a project, that person or persons, usually it's the VP of that area. If they're not owning that, they're not looking at it. They're not measuring it. So it's really important that people know who's accountable for the benefits, accountable for the metrics, and then accountably also measuring those metrics. So you have to figure that out, ideally at the early on in the project, so they know they're accountable for that. And then they're holding their teams accountable, if it's a leader, for example, throughout the course of the project. And then finally, inadequate oversight mechanisms. So if you don't have process pieces in place to revisit business cases, so this was one I experienced, and I'll share this example. It's going to make it really hard to measure the variance between what you projected and what you actually do. So for example, you want to have a business case at the beginning of the project, and ideally after the project has launched, you want to look at the call them lagging metrics, right? How did you do against your original business case? But then not having metrics in the entire life cycle of the project will cause systemic problems. We lived this. I lived this. So making sure you have mechanisms within your process. So I'll use the PMO process and the project management process, right? If your project managers, for example, are not identifying when your business case is impacted, easy one is increased costs, right? If the costs of a project have now increased more than, let's say, 10%, right? Is that original benefit you thought you were going to get from that project still of value? You have to have mechanisms within the process to make sure you're measuring for that. Because we've had, or I had early on when I started this process, projects that honestly, like halfway through, especially marketing projects, halfway through, that tool that they wanted to invest in or that technology they want to invest in was already obsolete, and we hadn't even finished the project. So you want to make sure you're building in mechanisms in your overall process to be visiting and revisiting the benefits that have been expressed at the beginning of the project so that you're not getting to a point of obsolescence as well. Anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I would say two things. One, don't fall in love with the project. You know how we talk about projects, and sometimes people just love a project and they've fallen in love with it. Sometimes that's what happens, and then we forget the value behind it. And it's not usually project managers that are doing that. It's people that are sponsors for a project, and you can't fall in love with it. You got to really look at it objectively. And then when you are creating these mechanisms, you have to really double check what you're doing, because sometimes you find things that just the math isn't right, and you'll find that you'll have to ask for multiple business cases like, hey, we got to revise that business case. I know we're mid-project, but hey, we just spent $10,000 on something and maybe now the project isn't viable anymore. It's just not worth doing. We're going to be losing money in the end. And so multiple business cases as you go through recalculating it is really key.
Next slide. So we talked a lot about the inflated assumptions. So these are the top reasons why variances happen, okay, from the beginning, let's say, of the project when we start out, and then the end of the project. So business cases often go wrong due to those inflated, let's say, you said we're going to add this many people or add these many customers, and it was overinflated and not really backed by any data or metric that let you come to that realistic assumption, right? So if there's not solid data for you to say we're going to have a 50% growth, you have to push a little bit and say, well, what's the data? Why do you assume 50%? Do you have market analysis? Like, what do you have another competitor that's done this? Once they added this, like, you've got to really get behind that data. It may not always be available, but in that case, you want to take more conservative stances on it, because then you're making a more risky decision if you don't have the right data supporting you including that in business cases. Additionally, what was really important and key to at least our success with business cases was having that partnership. So data reliability, but also having that partnership with finance. So I worked on a daily, sometimes weekly basis with our financial planning and analysis folks when I was looking and reviewing business cases, so that, because I had a responsibility, right, as a portfolio manager to make sure I was putting this, the right data in front of the VPs so that they're making quality decisions, right? We talked about in the beginning, how do you make a quality decision? Data backs, good data backing the business case, and then also a good partnership. So a weak collaboration with finance means bad forecasting, right? It also means when you've identified, like through variance reporting, let's just put it this way. Before we did variance reporting, it was very hard to to get any sort of change at a systemic level. Once we started doing the variance reporting and that went up in front of those sponsors and those VPs that were responsible for the decisions, guess what? When you start out the year with 80% variance from your business cases that you're making decisions on, we've got a problem. That variance reporting, what it did is it put the data in front of the VPs to say, hey, we've got an issue here. The variance is too large between those metrics or those assumptions that FP&A is making for these business leaders at the beginning of the project, based on what we're seeing when the actuals come in. And by putting just that very simple data, here's what was expected, here's what it is, guess what happened? We instilled and got real change at the corporate level, at the team level, and at the business case level. So we were able to actually transform the way we do business cases. That would not have been done or possible even without that strong, tight partnership with finance and our finance folks, because they did 2-year projections for us, 5-year projection for us, so that we can see all these different slices and dices. How would it look if we took out those assumptions? Would we be making better decisions then? And how about you don't put these things in the business cases anymore so that we're not having these overinflated assumptions anymore? And then there was this partnership and consensus, and then change resulted from that variance reporting. And we saw transformation happen as a result of it. Transformation in our process, transformation in the business cases we were putting in front of VPs, and then the VPs were making better quality decisions, because guess what? Our variance in our business cases were almost at 0 a year after we started reporting variance on this data. Anything you would add, Denise?
Yeah, you're just making me feel like maybe accountability did that, and having that visibility
Absolutely.
definitely did. I think the other thing that helps is once you start looking at that data, we even saw multiple projects were kind of sharing the same metrics. Like, we both can't take credit for the same thing, or you both can't, you don't get 2 sets of money when these things happen. So some of the metrics just let you sort through some of that, which made it, help you find the problems, help you find those variances. So yeah, good work.
Right. And so this was really, a result of, and then things that you can do. You want to refine your forecast assumptions, right? So you've identified the fail through, let's say, variance reporting like we did. You then want to review those initial forecast assumptions always. For example, 80% customer adoption in the first 90 days. Rewrite now something like that, right? Using an evidence-based logic by referencing historical adoption rates, right? So relevant industry benchmarks and consulting finance for those realistic projections. So again, using data-driven insights ensures more accurate and credible forecasting in business planning. So starting with an accurate forecast, ending with an accurate forecast, you absolutely have to engage finance. And when things change, like I said, costs go up, or costs go down even, consult finance, get your business case redone, and then it's giving you we'll call it the science behind it, to work with prioritization and resource management and so on and so forth, because you've got real data, real projections, and you're keeping those projections alive throughout the course of the project, so that you can pull levers and make decisions, right? And finance is going to have to give you partnership in that, or get you the data you need so you can make the right decisions. I can't stress that enough. Accurate forecasting, refine your forecasting when things change, and continue to monitor the forecasting so that you're not investing in things that are not of value anymore. If you blew your business case out of the water with a cost that's 3 times of what you expected, are you really getting what you wanted? I'm sure some of you may even have done that when you like go to buy a house, right? If the price is like 3 times what you thought it was going to be when you went into it, would you have gone into it? Maybe, maybe not. Anything, Denise, here?
Oh, this is great. I think the partnerships you've talked about, not only the like the math behind it, but you've also talked to the relationships, referencing what's going on in the industry. That's another one tied to your relationships. Talk to your partners, your colleagues, your folks. People know what these stats are and these numbers, and you'd be surprised what they'd want to share with you as well. I reach out to Deloitte, I reach out to various vendors and say, hey, just send me what you have on the industry. I want to learn and see from your perspective, and then you can compare to how you're doing things as well. And I found that to be very useful, just to stay connected to what's going on in the industry.
Absolutely. All right, for this next one, this is about the variance reporting, but it's also about variance storytelling. So, okay, you've identified there's a variance, right? But you want to analyze the table and identify the key drivers behind the numbers, right? So you want to emphasize concise, action-oriented updates for leadership. So you want to clearly explain, right, the main causes of the variance. So I've kind of put an example out here. It's the numbers are fake, obviously, but I wanted to give you an understanding of kind of what I did is like, here's what you said you were going to promise. Here, so it is, forward-looking perspective, right? We want to make 5.6 million in 5 years. What is the current net present value? How do I get a new reprojection or refinance? Is like, I worked with FP&A, and based on what we're seeing in the actual data that's coming in, whether that's sales or whatever, we're actually trending to make 3.5 in the next 5 years, right? So you want to do that, but you also want to outline the corrective actions, right? So variance is caused, I give this example at the bottom, we see there's a variance of negative 2.1 million. So we're coming in right now trending less than 2.1 million. The variance was caused by the end of I picked on Dollar General partnership. The forecast has been updated and the team is working on new sales to offset the gap. So maybe they're working with Dollar Tree or some of the other like discount retailers to fill the gap in the assumption. So this just gives you a nice framework of how to tell the story and how to make and what components to make sure your variance storytelling has. You want to make sure you've identified the drivers, what was driving the business case, what were the action-oriented updates. Obviously, we have the variance because we dropped Dollar General as a customer. We had them in our original assumptions. We don't have them anymore as one of our retailers. Sorry, not customers, but retailers. So, and here's what we're doing to potentially close that gap. And maybe you'll have one more visit of this business case in a year as to give the team a chance to report on if they've closed that gap or not. Obviously, that's up to your leadership team, but this is just one example of how you can do that. And then we've got a tip here. I'm going to hand it over to Denise if she wants to add anything, and then tell us a little bit about this tip. It's a great way to approach it as well.
Yeah. So Angelica, good example here, because say you went to folks and said, we're losing $2.1 million. Okay. Again, so what? What are you going to do about it? All that great stuff. And it's scary. That's a lot of money. Are we really doing what we should be doing? If you went to other people and told them the story and just said that, hey, we're losing 2.1 million on this project, that would be wrong. So our bright side tip is whenever you introduce something negative, always make sure you have an opportunity there as well. So show them the progress. This is what we've completed on the project so far. We intended to make 5.6. We're only forecasting 3.5. The team is working together to come up with other opportunities. And we've got those 3 that she mentioned. We're working with some of the other partners to get these opportunities to fix this gap. And so you're not just coming at folks with problem, because I can tell you all day leaders hear problem after problem after problem. You're coming to it with a problem, but yet some opportunities to fix. And so that's our bright side tip. Don't just talk about what was wrong and the impact, because that would be bad. You got to go there, you got to start there, but come up with some options for that. And so that's our approach to communication when it comes to this variance storytelling. So
Yeah,
great
it's
example.
it's very powerful. Variance reporting, even in accounting, it's very powerful, right? So if you have a variance in your spend, you know how powerful it can be. So take the opportunity to, highlight the good stuff too. So, um, it can be very transformative. And I've seen it happen, and it's amazing when it does happen.
Right. Because say you come with this example and you start to tell people about it, they could say, have you thought of these other opportunities too? You could do this, you could do that. It just starts the mind working on positive flow and positive thinking to make it even stronger.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
So we've talked about this a lot, right? The dynamic reprojection, making sure you have treated the business case as a living model, right? It's not a one and done, and that's really, really important. You want to make sure reprojection of the business case or of the benefit, right? So if you're expressing your projects as a benefit, maybe it's not a business case, but you've identified the value at the beginning. If it's triggered by costs and changes, scope, delays, market shifts, all of those can impact the value. So make sure you've, baseline that, and then you're measuring changes as they happen against that value that you've originally anticipated. Embed it into your process. So how we did it is we used to have a change process. So whenever there was an increase in cost to a project manager had to get approval. This is just the PMO example. Project manager had to get approval. Portfolio management was inserted in that process to ensure that it was also triggering approval. So was financial planning and analysis, so that they can just revisit the business case, say, hey, yeah, no impact, yes, impact. Now you've blown your business case out of the water. Does this investment even make sense anymore? Because the cost has doubled, tripled. So it just sparks the right conversations around the value, so that you're not eroding that value as these things are happening during the decision-making process, during the active phase process. So you can catch them early and have control over preserving that value. And then we have another bright side tip. This is a great one, the 90-day value plan. And I use this not only professionally, but personally all the time. And I'll let Denise share about that one as well.
Yeah, I always come up with a 90-day plan. In fact, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's almost the end of March. I got to do my next 90-day plan. I do this quarterly, personally and professionally, always come up with what's coming up in my work, in my life, and what I want to concentrate on. But when it comes to value plans, you could do the exact same thing. Even if you're just starting out, say you get off this call and you want to just start doing value planning and value, benefits realization and all this good stuff. You start with, what are we doing? What do we have? What do we know? No, let's get clear on what we want. Take 30 days to take a look at it through your systems, through your projects, through what you're doing. I always do the first 30 days is do some kind of monitoring. The second set of 30 days into the 60 days there, I always do something where I'm going to try and kind of see the gaps and kind of see what might not be right, but I'm not going to make any judgments. And then those last 30 days is when I start to course correct. I start to look at what could I change? What could I fix? I don't fix everything all at once, but I do take a look at it one by one and prioritize the top things. If you don't have metrics, maybe the first thing you do the 30 days is you're collecting those metrics. The next into the 60 days, then you're you're trying to look at those numbers and analyze. And then into the 90 days, you're going, these 3 projects, we should not be doing them. We're not making money on them. We should throw those things away if we can. And so I like the 90-day value plan for everything that I do. I always work in 90-day increments. It's perfect. It's just enough time to make decisions and somewhat fail fast. So you're in and done with that. And I think it applies beautifully with the business case approach here that Angelica has laid out. And so benefits realization is something that I do with my own business as well. I've started many things and I've shut them down if they don't make the money or if they don't do the things that I need them to do. And that's exactly what you need for corporate America as well. Back to you, Angelica.
Yep. And people always hear me talk about like treat your life to like a stock portfolio, right? What do you want to be investing in and what don't you want to be investing in? So always invest in yourself like you are today. So kudos to all of you who joined us today. And then, stop, like Denise says, investments that aren't giving you ROI. And honestly, slide 12 is really about that. Always be assessing the ROI, whether it's a project, whether it's in your own life, and recalculate when things are not what they should be or they're changing and hey, this is costing me way more than I thought in whether it's time or money or emotion. It can be as simple as that as well. Do I want to continue to invest in this? Evaluate the value, keep evaluating the value, ask yourself and challenge yourself the whys, and then make the decision. Stop, continue, let's see a little bit more, let's measure a little bit more, and then if not, let's make the decisions so that you are constantly creating value in your life, in your projects, in your work.
Love it. Love it. I feel so organized just being on this call already, Angelica. How about you? Just feel organized.
Everybody's going to be reflecting after this one.
Exactly.
And that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Remember, I mean, there's so many, you'll hear so many influencers out there too, and talk about it as like, if you don't understand your money and where it's going, if you're not measuring it, how are you ever going to control it? And, I learned that lesson late, so I'll just share, but it's the same thing with all of these is understand the value of whether it's the person, the process, whatever it is, understand the value it brings to your life, understand the value it brings to your organization, to your business. And, if it's and constantly evaluate that ROI and make decisions, strategic decisions of whether or not you want to continue that investment or not.
Love it. Love it.
The next one, slide 13. This was a practice we put into place, years ago. Many organizations have this practice, even personally. When I feel like I've failed at something, or I actually have failed at something badly, one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure you have lessons learned operationalized within, whether it's your organization, again, business, or your life personally. Okay. What are the strategic lessons learned? So I'm not talking necessarily from a PMO example, tactical notes, you really want to translate these to strategic insights to ensure that, that cross-functional alignment that you have in a PMO, a lot of times that's cost modeling, but that you're taking out the deeper learning, like what can and I always thought of it when I did it for companies, for a corporate setting, what is the deeper learning here? And what can we share that's going to make those decisions that we make next year for our stock or PMO portfolio or life portfolio, whatever portfolio you're managing? Remember, everything can be described as a portfolio. What are you spending your time on? What are you spending your money on? Know that. Look at your portfolio. And then what are the lessons learned that you're going to take into the next wave of investments? This was very important for a PMO to not just be doing, I know people do, they still should be doing them after action reviews. But many times what we saw was those learnings stayed very contained to the people that were on the project. And then there was no strategic learning that happened at a larger level so that we didn't invest in something like that again. or shared with the executive team as a potential process change so that we could not go into that again in that type of investment. So it's really, really important that you're taking the time to also pull out. It's okay, and create an environment, right? It's okay to make bad investments. We all do it. I'm still doing it sometimes. If you have a bad investment, it had horrible variance. It didn't have the results you wanted. What was the learning? I guarantee you there was a learning there. Okay, we're never going to work with that group again. We're never going to make that kind of investment again. Whatever those strategic lessons learned are, you've got to pull them out. You've got to take them to the next wave of investments. Otherwise, you're not learning and growing from your portfolio investment mistakes, maybe. And you can really honestly, generally translate that to life, to everything else you do. And whatever portfolio you're managing, whether it's your personal finance one, your corporate PMO, and culture is really important there, because if you have a culture that does not share and celebrate making mistakes in such a way in which you can take those mistakes, like I was lucky enough that the leaders I worked with wanted to know those mistakes, wanted to know those insights so that we could make better decisions going forward. And we did. And the variance reporting showed that as we matured, as we made better choices, our variance dropped to very little variance in our business cases, which means we were making decisions on business cases that were good and viable, and we weren't seeing the variance. And if we were seeing variance, make sure to take that learning. Denise, anything to add on this one?
Well, a simple one for my small business. I was investing in some TikTok, I would say marketing. I don't know what it was exactly, marketing. And I found that I never got any sales out of the TikTok channel. So I canceled that. Like, I can throw things out on TikTok, but that's not my people. That's not where I'm going to make the money. And so just canceled it. And I went fast. Like, I paid attention to it and then I canceled it immediately. So it could be really horrifying if I had done that for years and years and went, oh, wait, now stop doing it. So I watch it quarterly and then I know where to change. So quick strategic lesson. TikTok is nice, but not needed for business, at least not my business.
Yep. So have a mechanism in place where you're taking those insights out and making strategic decisions based on them.
Yeah. And so, Angelica, I'm watching the time here, so I think we're getting close here, but we've got a bright side tip here that we've already talked about, which is treating your investments like a stock portfolio. This is your own money, so I'll let you go into that.
Yeah, so benefits relationship management enhances portfolio governance through an evaluation lens and through financial perspectives that help prioritize. And I love this one, right? Everybody talks about the low cost, high return projects, right? So you never want to lose sight of, like, I know people call it low hanging fruit or quick wins, whatever you call them, right? You want to make sure that your portfolio is always prioritizing those low investment, high return projects for absolutely the maximum impact. I know when we managed the portfolio, or I managed the last portfolio I managed, there were some projects where it was such a low investment, and the ROI that they got on some of those low cost investments literally funded the entire portfolio. It was almost like we didn't spend any money, because within the first year, that ROI or IRR, I know it's financial term, or internal rate of return, was so high that it made the portfolio, funded basically. So you never want to lose sight of those types of things, whether it's again in your life or in the portfolios of your PMO or your business, but you want to make sure that you have a prioritization model and you're allocating resources to those, again, high value, fast rate of return type projects or investments, so that they can align with both your long-term strategy. So portfolios, again, treat it like a stock portfolio. I know I did, and that was the best thing I ever did because I could say, here's what we're investing in. It's kind of like when you do a self-reflection, right? If I'm spending 90% of my time on the things that are not what I really want to be doing, am I spending my time in the right place? So even look at your life, look at yourself in those same terms.
Nothing to add here. Great roundup here.
All right, some key takeaways, and then we'll have some time for questions, reactions, or just hang on and have discussion. But some key takeaways, right? So value that is visible becomes influence. That's my statement for you. Hopefully you take that away, right? So strategic alignment. So ensuring your benefits realization management aligns with business strategies. So again, you could use your stock portfolio and say, here's the things that are aligned to us getting here, and here are the things that align to us getting to this strategy. If it's not aligned to a strategy, should you be even investing in it? So think about it. With project execution, obviously it preserves the enterprise value and it guides organizational priorities. It safeguards. At the end of the day, benefits realization management safeguards value by ensuring strategic alignment. So do it for yourself too. Evidence-based business cases, evidence-based value statements, minimize the variance and enhance your decision-making based on those measures that you're doing. Maintaining forecasting discipline and accountability, both to yourself and to others. I know that's where a lot of people do personal coaching. Brightside offers that accountability. You're just getting help with that accountability. And then once you have that accountability, you're actually delivering on the results you wanted for yourself, for your business. And then throughout project execution. So very relevant for the PMO. So regular reprojection, again, remember, it helps prevent value erosion by adopting changes early and quickly so that you minimize the risk. And finally, applying strategic lessons learned leads to improved future investments and sustained organizational and personal growth. I hope you leave with those. I will give you one last final reflection. Think about what BRM processed, and you can put in the chat if you want, chime in, will make the biggest difference in your life, your organization, your PMO, however you want to answer it by, it's fine. But I want you to take a second to reflect on that. Let's see.
Yeah, I would say, Angelica, for me is to continue to do that forecasting reprojection, because I feel like I do the 90-day plan, but I don't often reforecast. So that one hit me like, oh, I need to keep doing that.
Anybody else? Is there one that you know specifically is standing out to you or calling out to you?
Angelica, for me, it was after you gather, right, after the after action review, right? And I think we did those, like you said, very well. But getting it out to a wider audience, maybe having, it as part of a leadership presentation for for others to see. That one really hit for me on this. So that's something I'm going to put in my workbook going forward.
That's really good. Yeah, like it's again the so what or now what, right? Like we got all this great feedback. Now what? What are we doing with it? And holding people accountable to doing something with it. So learning is great, but what are you doing with it?
You got it.
And hold people accountable to what they're doing with it too. That's the best.
I actually had that same realization. I think that was Brett that was speaking of I lead a PMO team, but we operationalize so much in the lessons learned, which is awesome. But I think that leadership discussion too of actually how do we make sure this doesn't come down so we're spinning our wheels over and over again. So that one hit home. I wrote that down on my sticky.
Thank you for sharing, and yay. Glad it resonated. I'm so happy. Right. And then I want to leave a little time and we can hang out. I can hang out for a little bit too afterwards, after we hit the hour, because we only have a couple minutes left, but just a little bit. If you need help, we can help. So make sure you reach out to Denise or I. Things we can help with is like, do you need just a strategy session to discuss value? Do you need implementing BRM at your organization because it's all over the place, or in your PMO, you've been struggling to? We can consult on best practices. We've done it. We've seen those failures we talked about today. And then, do you need help just updating those value statements on your resume, right? We talked a lot about those value statements. I'm sure if you have a recent resume, if you don't have those measures in there, any coach would tell you, make sure you do. So those are things we offer as services through Brightside Success. So Denise has talked about it many times, so please feel free to leverage that. And then I'll hang on if people want to talk, network, ask questions. I'm here for you.
Yeah, I'm going to go off screen because I just want to see the people. Thank you all for being here. You have a great team and great group. And Angelica just shared all of her amazing tips and tricks. Like, this is the magic of what she did day in and day out. I will tell you that there's like 500 more things behind that magic. So even though we did share 5 tips, there's 500 more. So if you do need her services, she's fabulous. I highly recommend you bring her into your org to help figure this out, because I used her as my kind of like my superpower behind me in so many ways. So I learn from her each and every day. So thank you, Angelica.
You're so welcome.